The throne chamber of Zerath Prime trembled with laughter. Warlord Zarkul, scales glistening like obsidian under the molten light, leaned forward in his seat of carved basalt and slammed a claw against the armrest. The sound cracked through the chamber like a war drum. "Humans," he growled, his voice a deep thunder that rolled across the ranks of Krylon officers kneeling before him. "Fragile, stunted, breakable. Fleas. They cling, they bite, and then they die beneath a single strike." The assembled warriors roared in agreement. 3-meter-tall soldiers, armor and plates fused with their very hides, pounded weapons against the stone floor. For the Krylon, this war was already decided. Humanity, they believed, had no place among the stars except as slaves or ashes. Zarkul raised one clawed finger, as if plucking something from the air. He pinched the empty space between talons and crushed it. So it is with them. A pest, easily ended. But far above, beyond the shroud of clouds that smothered Zerath Prime's volcanic surface, a human listened to none of it. Lieutenant Eric Vera stood in the launch bay of the Resolute Dawn, helmet tucked under one arm, exosuit sealed around his wiry frame. The Flea-class infiltration frame hugged him like a second skin, sleek armor of obsidian black, plating layered with coils of kinetic dampeners and microthrusters. It was light, almost fragile compared to hulking Metz humanity's allies once fielded, but it was designed for one thing: slipping past enemies too arrogant to look down. He checked the seals on his gauntlets with steady fingers, though the tension in his chest betrayed him. Above the suit's chest plate, his face remained calm, his expression edged with wry humor. That mask had carried him through countless missions. "You understand this is madness," said Commander Hestel, leaning heavily on the bay's rail. The man's face was lined from years of defeat, eyes weary from sending too many soldiers to their deaths. One man, one suit, against a fortress world. You'll vanish, and no one will remember your name. Eric met his gaze and smirked faintly. "Good. If they don't remember me, maybe they'll remember what I did." The commander exhaled sharply, shaking his head. "Zerath Prime is a nest of fire and iron. You won't make it 10 minutes inside. That's all I need." Eric snapped his helmet into place, and the exosuit hissed as it sealed. His voice came through the external speaker, low but firm. "They think we're fleas. Let's prove how much a flea's bite can hurt." The bay doors yawned open, revealing the abyss of space. Beyond, Zerath Prime turned slowly below, an angry planet wreathed in boiling clouds, its surface glowing where rivers of magma split the crust. At its heart rose the fortress spire of the Krylon warlord, a tower of black stone and steel rooted into a volcano's throat. It was less a fortress than a challenge hurled at the galaxy. "Dare to take me." Eric moved into the drop cradle, metal clamps locked around his shoulders and boots. His display lit with flight vectors, orbital paths, entry burn angles. Numbers scrolled faster than any human could read. But he didn't need to. He trusted the suit, trusted the engineers who had built it, and trusted himself to finish what it could not. "Lieutenant," Hestel's voice came over comms, heavy with resignation. "History will not forgive me for allowing this." Eric allowed himself a dry laugh. "History won't care what you allowed, sir. It'll care what we did." The clamps released. The cradle spat him into the void, a single speck of steel and flesh flung toward the furnace world. Silence enveloped him at first, broken only by the rush of his own breath. Then the suit began to shudder as the planet's atmosphere seized him. Fire licked across the visor, plasma roaring past as he plunged faster than sound. To Krylon sensors he was nothing, a falling scrap too small to register. That was the advantage. No one watched for fleas. Inside the storm, lightning forked through volcanic ash. Eric guided the thrusters in short bursts, steering into a gap between clouds, drawing closer to the fortress spire that loomed like a blade thrust into the planet's molten skin. The first wave of doubt struck. He was one man against an empire, a single soldier hurling himself into the mouth of the beast. If he failed, humanity's last chance at hope would burn with him. He clenched his jaw. Doubt had no place here. On Zerath Prime, Warlord Zarkul rose from his throne, the chamber trembling with each step. His eyes glowed with heat, his nostrils flaring, as if he could already smell the blood of his prey. "Let the humans bring their toys," he growled to his captains. We will break them. Their bones will line the lava rivers. Outside the spire, shields shimmered across the sky, hiding the fortress in layers of energy. Beneath them, an army of Krylon warriors stood ready, colossal bodies clad in armor, claws gripping plasma-forged blades. No one noticed a speck of fire streaking silently down from the storm above. Eric broke through the final cloud bank and cut his thrusters. The spire filled his visor, a colossus of obsidian, its walls glowing faintly from embedded lava flows. Alien banners flapped in the boiling wind, each one a proclamation of Krylon supremacy. "Fleas," he muttered to himself, voice steady now. "Let's see if you can scratch this one off." The suit systems chimed softly. Stealth protocols engaged. Weapons checked green. His boots hit basalt rock, a whisper against a roar of molten rivers. The fortress loomed before him, guarded by giants who still had no idea death had just landed at their feet. Eric flexed his hands, drew a blade from the suit's hip, and took his first step into enemy territory. The war for humanity's survival had just begun, on the back of a single flea. Basalt crunched under Eric's boots as he moved across the scorched ground. The air was a furnace, thick with sulfur and the hiss of lava streams cutting through stone. Above him, the fortress spire of Zerath Prime stabbed into the clouds, its armored walls glowing faintly from the heat of the planet itself. Krylon banners snapped in the boiling wind, each depicting a clawed hand crushing a smaller figure beneath it. Eric glanced at them only once before turning his eyes to the shadows at the spire's base. That was where he belonged, where he could slip in unseen. The suit's visor highlighted patrol patterns ahead. For guards, towering brutes with curved blades strapped across their backs stalked the perimeter. They moved with the confidence of creatures who believe themselves untouchable. Eric crouched low, letting the basalt outcrop shield his approach. His thrusters whispered once, enough to close the distance silently. The guard stopped at a junction of walls, voices carrying in the heated wind. "Human fleet scattered already," one rumbled, its words thick and guttural. "They squeal like prey when cornered," another answered. "I crushed one myself. Soft bones, brittle skin, vermin." The group laughed, a low, rolling sound that rattled in Eric's chestplate. He smiled under his helmet. Perfect. The Krylon weren't even looking for him. A narrow service vent glowed faintly along the wall, one of the auxiliary heat exhaust the suit had mapped. Too small for Krylon. Perfect for him. Eric slipped forward, hugging the shadows. His body moved like water, the exosuit amplifying each step, but muffling every sound. One guard turned slightly, nostrils flaring. Eric froze, heartbeat slowing to a crawl. The warrior's eyes swept the darkness, and then dismissed it with a grunt. Eric slid into the vent, the stone radiating heat through the armor. He crawled through twisting passages until the noise of the outside patrol faded into roar of inner machinery. Pipes dripped steam. Shadows stretched long across metallic grates. The air was heavy, oppressive, alive with the pulse of Krylon industry. He moved quickly, following the schematic on his visor toward a junction point. From here, he could access the fortress's outer systems. The mission required sabotage as much as assassination. The Krylon had to know humanity could hurt them, even here. Eric paused at a panel twice his height. He pried it open with the suit's blade, revealing veins of alien circuitry glowing with molten orange light. The Krylon built the machines like they built their bodies. Oversized, brutal, efficient only in sheer strength. Eric pulled a compact device from his belt and pressed it against the circuits. The screen flashed green. In minutes, he had seeded a loop into the surveillance feeds. To Krylon eyes, the corridors remained empty. "Fleas," he muttered, "invisible until the itch starts." The next section of corridor was wider, lined with crimson banners and columns shaped like clawed talons. Eric kept low, moving between shadows. His suit's sensors flared suddenly, movement ahead. A squad of Krylon soldiers marched in formation, weapons across their shoulders. Each stood nearly 3 meters tall, armor fused to their flesh, their scales etched with ritual scars. They filled the hallway like living walls. Eric pressed against the column's edge, calculating. Retreat would waste time. He drew a compact weapon from his thigh holster, a rail pistol no larger than a human hand. The shot could punch through Krylon armor, but only if placed precisely. The squad drew closer. Their voices carried. Commander says humans fight with machines because their bodies cannot fight. They hide behind steel, never facing us directly. They fear death, another growled. They always fear. Eric stepped from the shadows. His pistol whispered once. The lead soldier staggered as the shot burned through his temple. Before the others could roar, Eric fired again, two more collapsing with sharp cracks echoing off the stone walls. The last warrior swung its blade with the force of a falling tree. Eric dove aside, the weapon biting into the column where he had stood. He rolled, fired, missed. The blast scorched armor but didn't pierce. The Krylon snarled, lunged. Eric triggered his thrusters, launching upward. He slammed both boots against the warrior's chest, driving it backward into the wall. His blade flashed, cutting deep between armor seams. The Krylon convulsed once, then fell silent. Eric landed lightly, breath sharp in his throat. Blood, dark, almost tar-like, spattered the floor. "Not much fear in me," he whispered, reloading. The skirmish had left him winded. His ribs ached where the Krylon strike had grazed his side. Warnings flashed red across his visor. Armor integrity compromised. Nothing fatal, but a reminder, one mistake, and the mission was over. He forced his breathing steady. Pain could wait. Humanity could not. Alarms remained silent, his sabotage holding. Eric pressed deeper into the fortress, navigating a labyrinth of stairs and corridors that seemed carved from volcanic stone. Alien banners hung above him, each screaming the same message. Strength above all. He thought of Earth. He thought of how the Krylon banners had looked draped over shattered cities, their claws painted red with human blood. He thought of the silence in the ruins where voices had once filled the air. Resolve hardened in him like iron cooling from fire. At the next junction, Eric planted a second device, this one primed to detonate on remote signal. It was a small sting, but enough to bleed the Krylon fortress. Enough to prove that humanity could reach them even here, at the core of their power. His visor map pulsed, guiding him upward. Beyond this level lay the command spire, and beyond that, Zarkul himself. Eric allowed himself one dry laugh. Fleas don't fight fair. Let's keep it that way. He vanished once more into the shadows. The fortress swallowed him whole. Eric moved through corridors carved from black stone, veins of molten light running across the walls like arteries. Steam hissed from vents above, coating everything in a sheen of heat. The Krylon built their strongholds to intimidate. Massive halls, towering columns, banners the size of city blocks. But to him it all looked overbuilt, more muscle than mind. The suit's map pulsed, guiding him deeper. Each step carried him closer to the spire's heart, where Zarkul commanded. Eric's hand brushed the charge on his belt. It wasn't enough to level the fortress, but it would scar it. That was the point. At a junction, he found Control Hub. Alien consoles glowed in molten orange, the glyphs shifting in ways no human language could. Thick conduits pulsed as power coursed upward into the spire. He crouched and pulled another device from his kit. It was the size of a ration pack, its screen flashing blue as it synchronized with the suit. He pressed it against the conduit. Fingers steady despite the heat. Lines of code streamed across his visor. He tapped a command, and the fortress's lights flickered once. To the Krylon, it would look like a surge. To him, it was a door. "Surveillance loop stable," he whispered. "They're blind." The silence broke with footsteps. Heavy, deliberate, approaching from the far hall. Eric slid into shadow, pressing against the column. A squad of Krylon guards emerged, armored plates clinking softly. They carried plasma rifles. Long, jagged weapons pulsing with inner fire. Their voices carried low, guttural. Their words rough but clear through the suit's translator. The warlord mocks them openly. Humans cannot fight here. Too weak. Too soft. Then why does he call for every guard? Why seal the skies? Pride, the first said, dismissive. He wants a galaxy to see them die properly. They move past without suspicion. Eric let them go, then slipped back into motion. Each insult sharpened his focus. Let them laugh. The more they dismissed him, the harder the fall would hit. He reached a vertical shaft line with iron grates. Lava glowed below, casting flickering light up the walls. The shaft stretched into shadow above. His suit mapped it. This was a climb into the upper spire. Eric gripped the handholds and began to ascend. His muscles burned under the exosuit strain, but the thrusters gave him short bursts upward, propelling him from ledge to ledge. Heat pressed against his armor, searing through thin cracks in the plating. Halfway up, his comm crackled. Static. Then the sharp voice of Commander Hestel. Vera, report. We're picking up spikes in Krylon transmissions. Did they spot you? Not yet, Eric murmured. But they're restless. They can feel the itch. Extraction windows closing fast. We can't hold position forever. You won't have to, Eric said. He cut the channel before hesitation could creep in. The shaft ended at a wide landing. Eric crouched, sensor scanning. The chamber beyond was cavernous, filled with machinery that pumped molten rivers into conduits feeding the fortress. Krylon technicians worked at consoles, their bodies smaller than warriors but still twice the size. Eric crept across the shadows. He placed charges along the conduits, magnetic clamps locking with soft clicks. Each one pulse red, primed for remote detonation. It was going smoothly, too smoothly. The first warning came as silence. The technicians had stopped working. He glanced back. Every one of them was staring at him. Their eyes glowed faintly under the molten light. The suit's cloak had failed. A voice boomed from the far end of the chamber. There! Elite guards stormed in, their armor thicker, weapons glowing hotter. Plasma rifles leveled as they advanced. Eric dug behind a conduit, bolts of molten fire ripping past. The impact shook the ground. Shards of stone sprang around him. He returned fire, his rail pistol cracking in sharp rhythm. One Krylon dropped, a shot tearing through its eye. Another staggered as his blade found a gap in the armor. But they were too many. A blast slammed into his side, spinning him across the floor. Pain flared through his ribs. Alarm screamed in his visor, armor integrity failing. Shields gone. He forced himself upright, teeth clenched against the fire in his chest. The squad closed in, weapons raised for the kill. Eric triggered his last charge. The explosion roared to the chamber, heat and smoke flooding the air. Conduits shattered, molten streams spilling across the floor. Krylon guards staggered, blinded, roaring in rage and confusion. Eric seized the chance. He launched upward with his thrusters, vaulting over their heads, landing hard on a far platform. Pain screamed through his body, but he pushed forward, sprinting into the next corridor before the smoke cleared. His breathing came ragged, blood hot in his throat. Every rib ached, his suit dented and sparking at the side. But he was alive, and the fortress bled now, molten rivers spilling where his charges had torn the conduits apart. He slowed only when the shouts of pursuit faded behind him. The corridor stretched ahead, dim and silent, lit only by the molten glow that seeped from cracks in the walls. He leaned against the stone, chest heaving, helmet fogged with his breath. Images filled his mind unbidden. Earth under Krylon bombardment, the sky burning, the silence after the attack. His sister's voice, cut off mid-transmission. His home reduced to rubble. He had promised himself then, no more running. If humanity had to crawl, it would crawl forward. Eric straightened. Pain was irrelevant. His mission was not. He checked the map. The path led upward, twisting toward the command spire. Zarkul was waiting, arrogant as ever, certain no human could reach him. Eric allowed himself one grim smile. They'll stop laughing soon. And he stepped into the beast's belly once more. The spire's final ascent ended in a hall of fire and steel. Eric staggered through the doors, battered and scorched, his exosuit sparking from ruptured plating. Beyond stretched the throne chamber, vast, circular, lit by rivers of molten light cascading down black stone walls. At its center sat Warlord Zarkul. The Krylon warlord rose slowly, his shadow swallowing half the room. Armor of obsidian plates covered his towering frame, each piece etched with the scars of countless battles. His eyes glowed with reptilian fire as his voice rumbled like thunder rolling across a canyon. So it's true. A flea scurries in my house. Eric tightened his grip on the rail pistol, then holstered it. Against Zarkul's bulk, small arms were by seconds, nothing more. He drew his blade instead, its edge vibrating with a faint hum. Funny thing about fleas, Eric said, voice low but steady. You never notice them until it's too late. Zarkul laughed, the sound shaking the chamber. You think yourself clever, but you are prey. The galaxy knows this. I will make you an example. He stepped forward, each stride rattling the ground. The molten light glinted off his war blade, longer than Eric was tall, jagged edges burning with residual plasma. Eric's visor flashed warnings. Shields gone. Armor compromised. Internal bleeding detected. Didn't matter. He launched forward, thrusters flaring in a short burst. The blade came down like a meteor, smashing stone where Eric had stood. Shards flew. Eric rolled, slashing upward, striking Zarkul's thigh. Sparks burst, but the armor held. Fast, Zarkul admitted, turning with impossible speed for his size. His blade swept horizontally. Eric ducked low, the air screaming above his head. The impact slammed into a pillar, splitting in half. Eric darted left, circling, forcing the warlord to turn. He fired a quick burst from the pistol, rounds pinging harmlessly off the armor's plating. Distraction only. He aimed instead for the environment. A shot struck an overhead conduit. Steam burst down, clouding the space between them. He darted through the cover. His blade stabbed at a joint in the armor near the ribs. The tip pierced half an inch before Zarkul backhanded him across the chamber. Pain flared white. The suit absorbed some of it, but ribs cracked anew. Eric crashed against a stone, choking down blood. Zarkul advanced, slow, deliberate. You bleed. You break. That is all you are. Eric pushed his feet. Every bone screamed, but his grip stayed steady. And yet I'm still standing. The warlord roared, charging this time. The ground quaked. Eric sprinted toward him, thrusters kicking once, twice, launching him high. He hit the giant's shoulder, clinging like the insect Zarkul mocked. The warlord swung, trying to swat him off. Eric drove the blade down into the gap between shoulder and neck. Armor resisted, then gave. A guttural cry erupted from Zarkul. Eric yanked free before being slammed against the wall by the warlord's massive hand. The impact crushed the air from his lungs. Armor cracked, alarm shrieking. Zarkul lifted him high, fingers closing around his torso. This is how fleas die, crushed without thought. Eric's vision blurred. His hands groped for the last charge on his belt. He pressed it against the warlord's chest plate and triggered the clamp. It locked on with a sharp click. He bared his teeth. This flea bites back. The explosive detonated point blank. Fire and shock ripped across the chamber. Zarkul staggered, armor torn open, chest a gaping ruin of molten metal. Eric fell, rolling hard across the floor. He forced himself up, barely balanced, vision doubling. The warlord was still moving. Zarkul dropped to one knee, one massive hand bracing against a cracked stone. His voice came ragged but burning with rage. You think this changes anything? Humanity remains nothing. Eric stumbled forward, blade dragging sparks across the ground. He raised it one final time. No, it changes everything. He lunged, driving the blade straight through the exposed gap in Zarkul's chest. The warlord convulsed, eyes blazing, then dimmed. The giant collapsed backward, shaking the chamber as he hit the stone. Silence followed. The molten rivers hissed quietly, echoing through the vast room. Eric stood swaying over the corpse, chest heaving, armor ruined, blade coated in Krylon blood. Every nerve in his body screamed, but he stayed upright. One flea, he whispered, voice hoarse, was enough. The fortress alarms wailed suddenly, a rising chorus of panic. Explosions echoed to the lower levels, his earlier charges tearing through conduits, destabilizing the spire. The ground shook beneath him. Eric staggered toward the exit, every step an act of will. Behind him, the warlord's corpse burned in molten glow. The symbol of Krylon dominance lay broken by human hands. He didn't look back. The spire groaned as though alive, a dying beast collapsing under its own weight. Eric limped through the fractured corridors, the floor shuddering beneath each step. Fires licked the walls where molten conduits had ruptured. The fortress was coming down piece by piece, a chain reaction he had set in motion. His suit systems flickered in and out, warning lights filling the visor. He ignored them. Survival meant moving forward, nothing else. A blast door loomed ahead, half melted from the earlier detonations. He braced himself and shoved, servos whining under strain. The metal screamed, then gave way. Beyond stretched a narrow skybridge, exposed the storm raging outside. Lightning split the crimson clouds, illuminating the shattered skyline of Zerath Prime. Below, the Krylon capital burned. His sabotage had triggered secondary explosions across the power grid. Eric crossed the bridge, each step leaving streaks of blood. His body fell hollow, bones grinding, but his mind stayed sharp. He had done what he came to do. The rest was escape. At the far end of the bridge, his calm crackled back to life. Static, then Commander Hestel's voice cut through. "Vera, signal just reappeared. Thought we lost you." "Almost did," Eric rasped. "Status. Target neutralized. Warlord's dead." Silence followed, thick and disbelieving. Then cheers erupted faintly over the channel. Officers, pilots, crew had been waiting for a miracle. Hestel's voice returned, steadier now. "Copy that. We're sending the shuttle. Hold position, Vera. Just hold." He leaned against the bridge rail, eyes on the storm. Hold. That was the hardest part. Krylon forces poured into the streets below, their formations in chaos. Without Zarkul, command fractured. Soldiers shouted at one another, their discipline unraveling. Rumors spread faster than orders. "The warlord is dead." Slain by a human. One man brought him down one. Panic rippled through the ranks. The invincible image of their leader had shattered, and with it, the arrogance that fueled their war. For the first time, fear clung to the Krylon. Engines roared above as a human dropship broke through the clouds, its lights cutting across the storm. It descended, fighting turbulence, and hovered near the bridge. The ramp lowered, soldiers waving him forward. Eric forced his legs to move. Each step felt heavier than the last, but the sight of that open ramp pulled him on. A hand reached out, one of his squad mates, armor still intact, visor clear. "Got you," the soldier said, hauling him inside. The ramp sealed, the shuttle banked hard, pulling away from the collapsing spire. Eric collapsed onto the deck, head resting against the cool metal. "Medic!" someone shouted. Hands pressed against his side, checking wounds, patching what they could. He barely registered the touch. His focus was on the viewport. Through it, he watched the spire fall. The massive tower crumbled inward, swallowed by fire and molten rivers. The fortress that had stood as a symbol of Krylon supremacy sank into ruin. He closed his eyes. For the first time in years, the thought of Earth's sky unburned didn't feel impossible. Hours later, aboard the human strike cruiser, Eric stood unsteady but alive in the command deck. Bandages crisscrossed his torso, his suit discarded in the med bay. He faced the fleet officers, their eyes fixed on him with something new, something he hadn't seen directed at a human soldier in too long. Respect. Commander Hestel spoke first. "You went alone. You faced the warlord. And you returned. That makes you more than a soldier, Vera. That makes you a symbol." "I didn't do it to be a symbol," Eric said quietly. "I did it because someone had to bite back." The officers exchanged glances. One of them, a grizzled colonel, shook his head. "Symbols aren't chosen. They're forged." Beyond the cruiser's hull, messages spread across the void. Human channels carried the news like wildfire. The warlord is dead. Humanity struck back. Morale surged. Colonies that had been silent rekindling their resolve. But it wasn't just humans who carried the tale. Captured transmissions revealed Krylon whispers across their empire. Words twisted in fear. A single human infiltrated the fortress. A flea killed the beast. The image burned itself into their culture. Where once they mocked humanity as vermin, now they shuddered at the thought of the flea's bite. Eric sat alone in his quarters later. staring at the small patch he had torn from his ruined suit. The insignia was smeared with ash and blood, but the stitching still held, the emblem of his unit. He turned it over in his hand. His sister's voice echoed in memory. The last word she had sent before the Krylon bombardment cut her off. "Don't let them forget us." "They won't," he whispered. A knock came at the door. Hestel entered, arms folded. "Rest would serve you better than brooding." Eric managed a faint smile. "Rest feels foreign. The fight isn't over." "No, but tonight we breathe easier." Hestel's tone softened. "You gave us that. Don't underestimate what it means." The commander left him in silence. Eric lay back, exhaustion pulling him under. For the first time, his dreams were not filled with fire. On the other side of the galaxy, in Krylon war councils, generals argued in panic. Strategies faltered, trust eroded. The warlord had fallen, and with him, the illusion of invulnerability. In every hushed chamber, one phrase recurred: "Beware the human flea." The fleet pressed on, but now with renewed fire. Humanity was no longer the hunted. It was a hunter, small but unyielding, underestimated at the enemy's peril. And Eric Vera, scarred, weary, but unbroken, stood as proof. The galaxy had mocked the flea. Now it trembled at the legend.